Well, thank you on behalf of Diplomatic Connections for seeing me. And as I think I told your press attaché, the excuse, if you like, the justification for this is President Obama's visit to your country. So therefore I'm going to start by asking you, what were the concrete results of President Obama's visit to Chile?
Two main results of that. On the concrete results, we signed 7 agreements on different matters for bolstering the bilateral relationship and bringing it to concrete areas of our relationship. We signed 2 agreements on education. We signed an agreement on energy. We signed an agreement on exchange of blue-collar workers on small and medium businesses. We signed an agreement on the cultural side between the Smithsonian Institution and our system of museums. We signed an agreement on how to face disasters together and learn the 2 countries on earthquakes, tsunamis, and so on. So I was personally involved in negotiating some of these agreements and bringing it together to a moment where they were signed and putting them in movement after the visit of President Obama. And this brings me to the second and main result of this visit. When President Obama calls for an equal partnership between the US and Chile on his speech, provides us with the political fuel for working together between the 2 countries and to the region and to the world. And the political fuel, the political signal of choosing Chile as a partner, equal partner, is so important in everyday diplomatic life. Because when, for example, I'm working here in the embassy for putting Chile as a new country, as a first Latin American country on a visa waiver program, that means free movement of people without a visa, something that the European countries have, 32 of them, and Chile would be the first one. When I go to the Homeland Security Department for asking a place there and negotiating the requirements and signing the agreements, the political fuel of President Obama being in Santiago helps a lot. And on astronomy, and on free trade, on everything, it brings you a very special support.
Is the around this visa waiver?
Yes. Yes. We are putting a target of having in 2 years the specific requirements fulfilled for Chile. There is a law, the Immigration and Naturalization Law, that requires some specific mandatory things, and we are working in a 2-year process for getting everything achieved. Then there is a more complex requirement, which is the visa rejection rate should be below 3%. 3%. And Chile, it's going down on that visa rejection rate from 9% 3 years ago to 5.1%.
Right.
And we're confident that this is going to go down to 3% in the next, let's say, 2, at the most 3 years. So we want to be prepared for that, because that would put an incredible incentive for Chileans to come to the US on a more flexible way, and then to strengthen the relationship between the 2 countries.
It means the proportion of visa applications that were rejected by the United States.
Exactly.
And will you be the first Latin American country to have a visa waiver?
Absolutely. In the past, Argentina had this special status about 10 years ago. But then with the economic crisis of 2001, Argentina was taken out. Because what the American government wants is to prevent illegal people coming, overstaying beyond the 90 days of the tourist visa. But today Chile, I would say, is the closest nation in Latin America on the chances to be admitted to that program. And as I was telling you, when an American president goes to Chile, in the third bilateral visit in the history, the 200 years of history, this is the third time when an American president in office goes to Chile in a strictly bilateral terms. Fifth in multilateral. When he goes to Chile and says the things he said on our system, the values we share, the openness of the economy, the human rights support that we have in Chile, that brings to the two countries a bridge for achieving these kind of things. We are trying to accelerate the trade, the free trade agreement and brings you support. When I go to the USTR and negotiate something there, brings you a political signal that's very valuable.
But you already have the free trade agreement.
Yes.
You
a very successful
Peru.
one. Yes, Peru and Chile have free trade agreements in place. We have a very successful free trade agreement that entered into force 7 years ago. Very successful. More than 100% of increase in bilateral trade. And with a surplus to the US. So when American people fear about the free trade agreements because of losing of jobs, this is not the case of the Chilean free trade agreement.
Except that in 2009, both imports and exports went down by 25%.
Yes, absolutely. Because of the crisis, it went down. But now, in absolute terms, we are recovering of that crisis. We are reaching to a bilateral trade of 17 billion and regaining the growth path of the years before the crisis. And even on the other direction, the free trade agreement allowed, for example, for mining investments from Chilean capitals in Minnesota. Last year, 200 million were invested in Minnesota. And a leading Chilean mining company brought to the US management and technology and capital, and it could go to 2 billion, creating jobs there. So the free trade agreement is working both ways.
Right.
It's important for understanding how good is a free trade agreement.
Why do you think that President Obama chose Chile as his third country to visit in Latin America?
Because I really believe that the two countries share a set of principles that are similar. We share democracy as a system of government. We share an open economy, a system of opportunities and human rights. And Chile today, and I'm proud to say this, Chile today is a true believer in democracy. The new coalition in government since last year is a concrete proof that there is an alternate system of authorities sharing the same principles. And a peaceful transition from one coalition that it was in power for 20 years to the following coalition that believes with its own style, but believes in these basic principles too. That's very important, and I believe that President Obama recognizes that on the decision. Then a system of an open economy and a system of liberties with a social protection network. These are values that President Obama shares very deeply. Human rights. Chile is a country where reconciliation between different political sectors have been taking place, and it's seen as a very successful reconciliation process. And the belief in human rights is shared by all political parties. Chile today is presenting its candidacy to the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. It's co-sponsoring resolutions for a special relateur on the Iran issue. Chile is taking a lead on human rights too. And I believe President Obama, he said that, chose Chile because of these values that we shared.
And yet, during his time in Latin America, both in Chile and in Brazil, he had to address what was going on in Libya, he had to address what was going on in the Japanese tsunami. Do you think that, on the whole, this administration, I'm asking you this question because I've heard the criticism myself. Do you think that the administration and perhaps even previous administrations pay sufficient attention to what is going on next door? I mean, on the in Latin America, on their doorstep.
I can answer that question from the fact that I arrived last year,
right,
about 9 months ago, and very quickly we have a visit of President to Chile. I heard some of those comments that on the first 2 years, President Obama, they say that wasn't putting enough attention to Latin America. From my information, I'm fully satisfied with the attention of President Obama and his government to my country, to Latin America. For example, not only we got this visit, but Assistant Secretary Arturo Valenzuela has been very closely involved.
Who is Chilean?
He was Chilean by origin. And we have received visits from William Burns. We had the political, what we call jornadas políticas in January between the two countries. The announcement of the free trade agreements of Panama and Colombia, already formalized by President Obama. I would say, and the concern from the American government of the security and drug trafficking from Secretary Clinton. From my information and my experience, there has been a strong attention to Latin America and its dynamics during this administration.
What about Chile's relationship with the rest of the region? I don't think you'd be able to join Mercosur, for example, because you have a free trade agreement with the United States. How do you relate to the rest of your region, which is changing very rapidly in all directions?
Well, Foreign Minister Moreno, has put a lot of attention on the regional relations with our neighbors. And a lot of, the main part of the efforts on the foreign policy from Chile has been put on Peru, on Bolivia, on Argentina. And I think that the main principle behind that effort is that despite our differences, or historic differences, we should work on closening the friendship between the two countries. For example, with Peru, we have on one side an international lawsuit before the International Court of Justice,
right,
of maritime borders.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have a lot of investments from Chilean entrepreneurs in Peru, a country that is growing extremely good, with more than 8% of economic growth this year, introducing reforms and opening the country like Chile did 20 or 25 or 30 years ago. And the principle behind Minister Moreno's foreign policy there is why not, taking this relationship with these two levels. What is in the International Court of Justice should remain there and be solved there. And both countries are very respectful of international law. And on the other side, our friendship, our common destiny should also be there and be strengthened between the two countries. And this is the philosophy that we are putting on our relationship in the region. Of course, there is a model of development shared by certain countries, different to other model of development, probably with Peru, with Colombia, with Panama, with Costa Rica. We share a closer model for developing our countries. There are other models in the region that has some difference with ours. President Piñera has said, well, let's convince them with our results, with reducing more poverty, with giving more opportunities to our people, and let's say that our model is going to succeed through those examples.
Bilateral disputes are concerned. Of course, you had one with Argentina some time ago, which did not go to the International Court. It went to the Vatican.
Yes.
And was in fact resolved by the Pope himself.
Yes, exactly.
But in this case, you did not resort to the Vatican, you resorted to the international courts.
Which one are you referring to?
In the Beagle case, you went to the
Beagle
Vatican.
case.
In this one with Peru,
Yes. Peru decided to bring this issue to the International Court of Justice. In the case of Argentina, it was a very wise decision from both countries to bring it to the Vatican. We had an extremely serious situation in '78,
yes.
And it was solved by the Pope, and we signed a treaty on '84 called the Tratado de Paz y Amistad that closed finally the issue of the Beagle. We are very happy that on a most critical moment we were able to solve our differences.
Let's get back to the relations in the region for a minute. When you talk to other people in the region, other politicians in the region, they talk about progress towards integration. It's a word that is used a lot in Latin America, I think, these days, integration. I mean, and it means different things to different people. You've just told me what it meant to you, but I mean, you're not on the same wavelength as the Brazilians when it comes to integration.
Well, what Chile understands for integration is necessarily open its borders to free trade and free movement of people. And as an example of that, Chile is probably the freest country in the world. We have free trade agreements with 57 countries and 20-something agreements with 57, with the European Union, with Asia, with Korea, with China, with the US, with the region, with Peru, and with Central America too. We believe that integration requires economic openness. And other countries look this on a different way, on a progressive way. And we decided on early 80s, and this was speed up in the 90s, to open unilaterally our economy, our borders. They brought down our tariff to 10% when other countries had 50 or 100%. And then we started to negotiate these agreements. We believe that integration requires generosity for a better prosperity. Right now, we are looking for integrating our neighbors in an energy zone. Chile is running out of energy because of its growth, but other countries, our neighbors, have a surplus on energy. And we should work there. Minister Moreno is committed to do something with probably with Bolivia. We did it with Argentina on the gas on the 90s. We should be able to do to create an integration on energy, for example. And, on the side of nationality, Chile introduced an amendment to its constitution recognizing the multiple nationalities.
Right.
There are measures that are telling you about what Chile believes is integration.
So Chile is not interested, I would say, in the same sort of vision that you hear from some other Latin American politicians and officials of a kind of European Union type arrangement, progressing from trade into more complicated political institutions and even the courts and so on.
But I believe that the European Union has its own identity because of the very particular facts that led Europe to create the European Union from the 60s on. And having had the two wars that they had in the 20th century, and the process of creating a common market that led to create European Union with its different treaties, it's a very unique one, different to recreating Latin America. But Chile is not closed to an idea like that if the institutions and the convergence of this kind of our countries are growing. We share so much with our neighbors.
Including a common language.
Including a common language.
Which the Europeans don't have.
Absolutely. For example, let me add you that the process of independence of our countries, it was a common process from Francisco de Miranda to José de San Martín to O'Higgins. We share same founders on the independent process. So we have, of course, a scenario, a framework for becoming something more than an economic integration, but probably is not today. Is not mature enough for
maybe down the road sometime.
Down the road.
Last year, Luis Alberto Moreno, who is the IDB director, wrote an article in the Financial Times in which he said that while Europe and the United States are still struggling to emerge from the 2008 economic meltdown, Latin America is enjoying steady growth. For example, the World Bank projects that Chile in 2011 will have a growth rate of 5.8, I believe.
Even more.
How do you account for this? Not just for Chile, but for Latin America, somehow managing to weather the 2008 crisis so much sooner?
Well, Chile faced that crisis in a very good position because of two or three macroeconomic bases and decisions that were taken with high discipline. What the economists call the superstructural superavit.
Right.
Chile faced the crisis being a net creditor country.
Right.
We had more assets than debt. Right. And what the government did was taking some of those assets and put them in the economy to face the crisis and the unemployment rate. And we were able to do that because on the good times, Chile saved money. For example, when I see the trouble on the budget discussion today in the American side, I recall certain rules that we have in our system that are proved to be very, very sound.
Right.
For example, Congress in Chile cannot add spending on the budget bill. Can only amend the spending, but not add spending. Congressmen or senators are not able to introduce bills with spending bills. Only present and we call the Iniciativa Legislativa Económica, which is bills that involve spending only can be introduced by the president.
Right.
And things like that. For example,
and the government, presumably.
And the government,
Yeah.
Then of course, if a budget bill is not approved on a certain period of time, the budget presented by the president is going to enter into force. So putting a time frame limit on Congress, and this was a lesson of 100 years ago with the Civil War of 1891 in Chile.
Right.
So certain rules on the Constitution that put you certain limits, and also a smart decision from President and Minister of Finance before the crisis of saving money.
I know that Chile and the United States signed an agreement whereby America would help Chile develop nuclear energy. This happened, I think, before President Obama came to Chile. How have Japan's problems with its nuclear plants affected Chile's decision to go forward with a nuclear program?
The agreement was signed 2 days before President Obama arrives. We set up a day where these 7 agreements were signed. And unfortunately, a few days before, Japan had its own earthquake, and the environment was not really supportive to do things on energy, on nuclear energy. But in reality, what we signed was just cooperation on scientific side, exchange of scientists, for helping Chile on having better knowledge on how to take decisions on nuclear policy. It wasn't really a decision on whether to go on nuclear energy, but was preparing Chile better for taking a decision on that side.
Right.
And the public opinion understood that. So that's the scope of the agreement.
I see. When you got here, almost your first month, I think, there was the crisis within the mines in San Jose, with the miners trapped in San Jose.
Yes.
Where are the miners now?
All over the world.
Okay.
The miners are some of them are in Chile, some of them are traveling throughout the world. They received an extremely high number of invitations for visiting different countries and different areas of the world. They have been in Israel, in Europe, in Britain, in Ireland, in the US, in the West Coast, because they are seen a symbol of courage,
Yes.
of determination, of a happy end of what could have been a tragedy, and a symbol of what the Thai rescue was, a unity of a country, accuracy of the professionals there, of spiritual strength, and working class people with incredibly high
Nobility, really.
ability for survival.
Nobility.
And nobility too. And nobility too.
One other thing I think that's your country, in fact, has gone in a transition from a military regime to a democratic system, which is now very firmly in place, having, as you said, gone from a center-left coalition to now a center-right coalition. Do you think that there is a lesson here for other countries? I'm thinking now what's happening in the Arab world.
It's different to give lessons to other countries, but definitely I believe that Chile managed with its own problems and own difficulties, some of them still pending, but managed remarkably well on a transition to democracy. The way Chile was able to face the end of a military rule and to put the military under constitutional democratic framework, the way we were able to create a sound system of political parties that trend to create two main blocks, moderate blocks for governing, the way we were able to solve our differences through a system that is a presidential one, with a strong presidential authority, but with a legitimate Congress playing its own role.
Right.
These things are worthy to share with other countries, wherever they need.
I understand that former President Bachelet has been in Cairo.
Yes, she has been in Cairo, former senators and ministers, Genaro Arragada and Jose Vitar, have been called by some Arab countries to share the lessons. And we are proud of that. We're extremely proud of helping other countries if they want, they need civil society to take lessons on how we did this transition.
Not something that has been organized at government level.
Not yet.
In other words, your government is not actually offering to help.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. But of course, the government is proud to have its own
Sure.
its own people or former officers sharing their experiences.
Thank you very much indeed. This was very interesting. On behalf of Diplomatic Connections, thank you again.
You're welcome. It's been very